I was asked last year, like you said, like Damien said, to talk to the class about design and across the corporate environment and how it works today, especially with the new age of entertainment, visual media, big data, information analysis, and all of these other fields. And like I said, I did that in Skype, and I figured I would show up and actually do a more focused talk on it. First, beginning for me, when I started my venture into design, I refused to go into design. I was an illustrator. I wanted to do comic books. I wanted to draw pictures. I wanted stuff blowing up, just things that normal design didn't roll into. In the sense of if it involved like the idea of like placement of colors and images, that was not really my field. And then I decided that I enjoyed things like shelter, food, and money, and design seemed like an option that looked really good. And my mom was no longer letting me live in her basement anymore. So I went into design through print, and then this new thing called the web started. And then after about a few months where people thought it was a flash in the pan, it eventually became a thing, and it was something you had to learn. And that was where I began the very first of many lessons I'll learn in life, is that as a designer, your first role is to recognize the fact that there is no one thing you should do. There is no one pitch. There is no one skill set you should ever have or ever evolve. As a designer, the one gift we have is that we can literally learn something new and evolve, and your field grows with you. So that was the first thing I learned. Eventually, I ended up going in the web, and later on, things such as interactive design, information graphics, and just the user experience started coming into play. And again, as you develop in your roles as whatever field you want to go into, in this particular case, this is what we're going to talk about is user-centered design and user experience. You have to realize that it's ever evolving because your demographic, your audience, is always evolving as well. So the trick is how do you pay attention to that? How do you focus on that enough that whatever client you have, whatever corporate entity you're working for, or even a government entity, how do you make sure your skills are relevant? How do you make sure that your skills are relevant to them while making sure that your skills are relevant to yourself? I mean, that seems like a lot, but the thing is that your greatest advocate is yourself. One of the things about UX and user-centered design that I enjoy is the fact that it's brand new. HCI, brand new. The concept of developing a medium for people to be able to absorb a crap ton of data without their brains exploding is relatively kind of new. And I don't mean like the concept of human-computer interaction. That's always been in the foreground. But being able to like literally walk into a room of people, do interviews, do research, study their demographics, figure out what type of individual they are, what type of mode they are, what type of personas, and we'll get into that later on that particular subject later. But what type of specific characteristics that they have that you can apply to whatever website, product, app that you are developing for them to make it intuitive. I mean, we all seem like Apple stuff, and whether you love them or hate them, you look at one Apple product, no matter what it is, it works across the board. I mean, I am not an Apple fan, but the genius behind it is the fact that you can look at it and intuitively know what certain things do. That is also because of the fact that, for our current generation, and probably the one before it, we are probably the most savvy computer users and gifted with the fact that, you are literally born with a computer in your hand of some type, be it, I guess now, a watch, a phone, a laptop, iPad, what have you. So the concept of you being separated from a machine at any given time is no longer a possibility. I mean, out of curiosity, who here does not have at least one smart machine on them, like, in their life right now? Like, who has a smartphone? Anyone have an iPad? anyone ever use something called Fitbit? Those are little machines that basically they work with you in your basic human system to give you what information you need at a specific point in time. Even a GPS system is perfect example. Who here can get around without a GPS? I mean, like if you were dropped in the middle of a strange land and you didn't have a GPS, who here thought they could make it home safe? And I'm not talking The Amazing Race, although that's a really good example of like what not to do. But the point is that as user experience people, human-computer interaction people, computer interactive implementers, as just general people whose job it is to deal with data science, your job is basically to handle the influx of massive amount of data we have right now. The internet alone, which, yes, that's a big part of the data flow. There's other areas that it comes in from, like, your phone, like the things that come from, like, your calendar function. These kind of things are the things that we have to help people assimilate. And I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of Future Shock. Cory Doctorow talks a little bit about it, but it's the concept of so much technology, so much information out there that people just can't handle it. Right? Some people shut down, some people just go. That's where you get a lot of people who decide that I'm going to disconnect for a while, and they really don't disconnect. What they really do, in my opinion, and feel free to argue with me, is they just reduce the amount of information that they absorb at a time. Unless you're like trapped in the woods somewhere in a house where there's no access to any kind of electronics, any information you need, it's pretty hard to cut yourself off from all data without a concerted, strong effort, I'd say. Drop yourself in the middle of nowhere without a GPS. So our job is to genuinely help them assimilate this. This is a new concept in the sense that from a business perspective, it seems like a really good idea. As a designer, we know this is what we can do. On the designer side, it's we need to make something to help them assimilate it, make it work, make it adjustable. From a business standpoint, is we need to do this because we can make a lot of money. 9 times out of 10, or maybe 8, they have no idea what that means. UX, UI, human-computer interaction are really great buzzwords, but when you walk into the business world, I will venture that the people you are working with have no set idea of how that's supposed to work. They have an idea of what they want to do, but the actual process of developing that is where you come in, and which is why I said that you are your own best advocate, because you are both, bringing in a new skill set that honestly is only about 5 years old, like UX UI is, but not HCI. I think just to jump ahead, I think in the future, UX and UI will eventually just be rolled into human-computer interaction as part of one of the development stages of HCI. So, however, you're the advocate to have advocate to explain to them that this has to happen. But you will get people who are so excited, like they have a book, they read it somewhere, they were so proud they read that book, and they have like all the buzzwords they need. Like they even know who Stephen Few is. If anyone know who he is, he's a big guy. He's a big guy dealing with big data analytics and how to actually explain it in the form of dashboards for big data simulations, medical industry dashboards a lot. Use his theories. And you got to go. That's great. But they don't know what they're doing, and that's where you come in. You may get there are some places that actually has it, but by and large, developing that process will be up to you, and it won't be just because even if they already have a framework set up, but you have to bring your skill set in to pretty much improve that framework, smooth it out, and make it a true process that benefits them, but also benefits you, and the return on investment on both sides is somewhat pleasurable. At least that's the goal. That can't always happen, but sometimes it'd be great if you could. So that's kind of where I ended up falling into it. Like I said, started off in print, went to the web, did some sideways work in the interactive design and big data visualizations, and eventually became into UX because it seemed like the thing to do. took me about 3 years to understand the process, which the interesting part about the evolution of your work will be the fact that half these skills you already know, but you're going to apply them in a different way. And that's what the best part about this job is, the fact that you basically get to be a bit of a cowboy and basically blaze your own path of how you want to set this up. Also, feel free to ask me questions. There will be a longer Q&A afterwards, but if you have questions during that pops up, feel free to ask me while I'm talking to you. So, and if you can't hear me, please let me know. I do tend to waver and fall off. So, you're a UX designer. What do you do now? Okay, we're gonna start this all over. Who here knows what a UX designer is? You don't count.
Design user interfaces.
No. But no, and honestly, that's not a bad. That's not. I'm sorry. I don't. It's not. It's not a bad answer, but that is literally the mindset that business people have. Like they believe that if you're a system programmer or a system engineer, they believe they build a product, and then your job is basically to put essentially lipstick on a pig and a really nice wedding dress, and that's your product right there. And that is exactly how you do not design a product, because it's kind of like building a really great car without the doors or the hood or the wheels, but you know it's going to run because everything says it will. Every test you have says it will until you actually put it out there and goes, we need wheels, and then the question comes, what kind of wheels does it need? What kind of doors? How are the doors supposed to fit? And what are the shape of the doors are supposed to be? How do you put a hood on it if you don't know how big the engine block is? UX design is really more about developing a product, and there will be some terminology switches between because there is UX designers, user interface designers, and then there's user experience researchers, and that's where the field gets a little muddy with semantics. But the goal really is to build a product that, and this is a word that I find to be extremely pompous, but works best holistically, works with both the engineers, data scientists, system programmers, and developers to basically build a product that, based on what the user needs, not as goals, but what the user needs. There used to be a mindset that pretty much you're building a product to get somewhere. These days, that's not necessarily the case. The user has needs, and you're trying to fulfill those needs as much as possible. And what you want to do is build a product that basically will, work with that user to help them get somewhere, but without a clear destination, you can't truly design something. But what you can do is kind of give them the car so they can actually go somewhere. And to do that, for lack of a better word, the user experience has to be enough that it allows them to explore or develop their interest in whatever they're doing to get to where they need to be. So, which is where the car analogy comes in, because essentially, the car is pretty much is the app they're building, and they have people to get in it, use it, and go somewhere. But a lot of businesses believe that their job is basically build a product and bring the user interface person or user experience person in at the very end of it, and all you do is clean it up and put a nice little shell on it. And while that is a way to go, that's not really user experience, because you don't account for the fact that what artifacts and assets that they use does the user want to keep on certain areas? How do you deal with interactions of activities like, say, something as simple as an export function? How do you design an export function that makes the user happy? Is it just you put export? What if they want different file types? What if they want to make sure that for a lot of users, they want to actually see the process happen, like all files collected, all files compressed, all files sent. I mean, these are the things that you have to consider. And from the mindset of you're just building an interface, it limits the process, because all you're really doing is basically, like I said, putting lipstick on everything just to make it look pretty without actually thinking about what does the person need, what does the app need to do, and what does the app need to facilitate as well. So as a UX person, and here is where semantic things start to come into play. There are UI designers, people whose job it is to only user interface interface design. But he is that, excuse me, that person is usually part of a user experience team. And before everything gets to him, there are user experience researchers, information architects, which I'll go through these terms later, if anyone doesn't know, information architects, and user experience designers, whose job it is to actually plan out the experience or plan out case studies or multiple experiences that they or anticipate the user will go through. So the concept of user-centric design has really kind of been thought of for a while. And I think 2000 is when the concept of user-centric design in regards to products is really starting to take off. And it's always been in the back of the head of many books. If anyone have one book I'll recommend for a lot of people is the UX book. It's probably one of the best books to go through the idea of developing a product. But here's the thing, it's not about building something, it's about understanding the mindset, the philosophy, and pretty much understanding being able to assess, gather information on the goals of the individual. And I know I use goals a lot, but it's not really, goals probably not the best term. It's more of fulfilling a need. And that is actually a relatively new thing these days, because anyone who has an iPad, can anyone tell me what you use it for? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. In my opinion, the iPad's probably one of the best machines built because it has no set thing. Like, there is no, when they released the iPad, they did not say, hey, this is what you can do with it. Like, they literally just sent it out and said, people, it is literally a box that is pretty much user defined. Like, there are people I know who literally just use it for Hulu, Netflix, and Amazon Prime. There are people I know who use it like, for me, I use it for presentations. Like, if I'm showing off my portfolio, I'll bring the iPad with me because the giant, 11 by 17 or even 8.5 by 11 portfolio is hard for a lot of people to get into, but an iPad, they can just flip through and it goes through in a few minutes. It is a beautiful example of pretty much a user-defined product that, while the experience can be a little clunky, depending on what you're doing with it, but you can do it just for games. But that's where I think design and human computer action is, where it's no longer about telling the user, this is what you want to do with something. It's, you're telling the user, this is what you can use to do whatever you want. Now, whatever that is, you don't know, but they will figure out the direction they want to use for it themselves. So long story short, that's kind of what a UX UI person does, and that's where you guys come. Which is why when I say this is a relatively new field, because I don't know about you, but there has never been a course that really encompasses this in like one track. Like, this is a multiple discussionary field, from psychology, data science, information architecture, graphic design, visual design. Just, it takes a lot of fields, but if you think about it, as humans, we've pretty much developed to the point where this is what we do. Like, this is how we handle stuff, how we handle information. And it can't just be about, you have a giant screen, you throw stuff up. Like, one of my favorite movies with great visuals is Minority Report or The Avengers, where like you see Tony Stark's board and he has like all the screens up. That looks great. I guarantee if you did that to someone in real life, their head would explode. He's got one eye and supposedly he can like absorb all that within 2 minutes. Yeah, I don't think that. I mean, it's great in movies, but I think from a design standpoint, that has to be tempered with hierarchy of information hierarchy, like what is required, what isn't, what does he need to be able to access, that kind of thing. A lot of people here. Did someone raise their hand? Okay. So that's kind of where the foundation and concept of UX comes in. There's UX designers, UI designers. Honestly, they're kind of slowly starting to roll into each other because they tend to do both. Now, that's not to say that you have to do both, but if you want to make yourself commercially viable, you should have a broad spectrum idea of how to, A, communicate with the people you'll be working with. And I don't mean you have to be a programmer or a developer, but you need to know they're going through in regards to developing the ideas you come up with. Like if you're gonna make a really whiz-bang interface, you better know what the designers have to go through, or you better have talked to your developers and go, this is what we want to do. And if they look at you and go, we have no idea what this is, you just did the most beautiful work that honestly just needs to be put in a frame and put on the wall versus actually being used as an application. Because the other thing about this, and this is part of your goal, is the fact that you are no longer working in a bubble. For the most part, you can work in a bubble. However, you need to check back and forth if you're working to recognize that your team needs you to basically be a part of them and help them work on their end to make sure that your cycles are looking great. And that's where that's where the test comes in for a lot of people. Sorry, checking time to make sure I don't run over you. You guys have time to ask questions. So at this point, that's kind of like where that's kind of the mindset I have in regards to UX, and pretty much what I go through mentally when I'm dealing with products, clients, project managers, product managers, CEOs, clients, just all the stakeholders that's involved in the development process. If you're working for the government, there's probably a few others down that line you have to deal with as well. But by and large, the other thing it leads to is you don't need to talk about what you're doing. You have to explain to them what you're doing. And not just in the way of this picture, this is why it works. It's you need to be able to like physically stand there, and it's not so much defending your work, it's an explanation of the work you created, the mindset behind it, the data behind it, is why it works. Because you will sometimes get clients who do not want to go with it. Sometimes they may say they don't like that shade of green, or they may go, why do we need to have a Dropbox for that? Why can't we just have a pop-up be the answer for it? For the record, you do not ever want to use a pop-up unless you do want to. It's a distracting thing, and it's a horrible, horrible design element, and it's kind of lazy. In the sense of that it takes away from the user experience. Like it draws them, like, if you want them to stay on your page and you do say a modal pop-up, that modal pop-up needs to be really important, and it needs to make sure that it's because you want to do something. But that's kind of that's what you have, that's kind of like the thinking you have to remember. Because when you meet these people, they don't know that. They just know what they like on other people's websites or other products, and they think it should work for them as well. And, don't get me wrong, the modal idea may work, but you probably have a better idea to make sure that their experience is more linear, and a little smoother than dealing with that. Because, like I said, they will argue with you, and the only way you have to argue back with them is not, I'm right and you're wrong, it's with data and information. Like information about your job, information about the goal that you want to do, and why it works better this way. Now, that being said, they're paying you money, and if they still don't want to do it, then you do it the way they want. You try to make it as nice as you can, you try to make it as smooth as you can, but that is the reality of our business. As much as we like to love our craft and make everything our personal baby, somebody's cutting that check, and until everyone becomes independently wealthy and can work on their own, you're pretty much you're beholden to them. So it's not horrible, but it's up there. Like for instance, one of my more interesting arguments is with this gentleman. He's no longer a client, but he used to be. He really liked spiked heels. And you may wonder why this is important. He runs a bakery, and for some reason he believed that because the shop the pop-up shop he was making was spiked cupcakes, and he decided that we should literally make an entire website dedicated to spiked heels and cupcakes. I can't begin to tell you that I had no defense as to why that shouldn't happen, other than spiked heel and cupcakes would look great. However, you might want to expand your demographic beyond spiked. I mean, I like spiked heels. I mean, it looks great on TV, but I mean, from a business standpoint, you have to explain to him that that's not going to make you any money. I mean, it'll look great for a time, but from a business standpoint, you have to explain to him that their long-term goals and their short-term goals don't really mesh well with each other. And sometimes you explain it. But again, if he's paying for that, that's what you give him. However, you try to help him along, because as much as they'll argue with you, if you can convince them that this is a long-term goal, they will thank you in the end. Let me also just say, these are all idealized processes. Working with people, because they're people, will always make it. Working with people will always be complicated. So not everyone's going to be, one of the best clients in the world, the most receptive clients, but the only thing you can strive to be is just a professional and make sure that the work you give them is the best work you can give them. I work for a lot of clients. One of my favorite clients to work for was the State Department. And one of the projects that they asked for was you have to be flexible. When I say flexible, you'll understand that. One of the things about the State Department that I enjoy is that they will drag you into a lot of different projects. One of the things they asked me to do was they needed a project where they wanted me to build fake passports for security reasons. They wanted to be able to track them down, have people and test. They'd be testing passports. They send them off to all the readers who received them and basically able to test them. So I had to build those up from scratch. So we did that process and they came back. We had a bunch of data from it. A lot of funny stories and a lot of people who got arrested. There was a very awkward period where it was because what then came out was the fact that because this was a silent project that I were held to, let's just say that when they asked where did the fake passports came from, my name's on that list. If I say my name, I mean only me, because it was done by my head. It was because I was a contractor coming in. So there is literally a form out there with my name as literally passport recreated. So which may get me clearance special this time of year. So, but the reason I'm telling you that story is the fact that the point of the passports was part of an experience that we had developed to test out State Department employees, but also develop a case study of how these things were getting used. And we worked out that plan. So that's kind of one of the projects you want to do. That's kind of the work that you will be kind of stepping into. The other thing that comes into play is semantics and context. Your favorite stories. One of the things that I've worked for a bunch of other countries as well, developing dashboards. My favorite country to work for is Kazakhstan, and not because of the movie Borat. Because you have never, ever experienced a cultural divide that you have when you try to talk to a Kazakhstani executive about his choice of language. So I'm assuming here has either heard of or has seen scenes from the movie Borat. It's not wrong. I would say probably around 75% of that is true. It's definitely blown out of proportion on some levels, but for the most part, there's a certain bit of development going on there in regards to old world beliefs and new world beliefs, and they're trying to break out of that. And they have a strong commitment to do that. And they try really hard. One of the things they try to do is the UN has what's called a non-permanent security council member, and part of my job was to pretty much create a campaign, a user experience that allows them to do it. The very first campaign they wanted to run was pretty much their testament to fight against human trafficking. We all know it sucks. It's horrible. They hate it horribly because they just do. But one of the language they want to use is Kazakhstan fights overt human trafficking. It's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to explain to this guy that you don't want to use overt human trafficking as your argument of why you're against human trafficking. And he doesn't understand the concept that if you use overt human trafficking, it means that you're okay with covert human trafficking, which he just did not believe was true. So I'm literally on the phone with this guy for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, going, you can't use the two words. And I'm going, what do you mean? He goes, let me give you an example. You hate overt human trafficking, which basically means if there's a truck full of women screaming that they're being human trafficked, you guys will stop it. However, if they put a tarp over them and they're all duct tape quiet and you're quiet, you're perfectly okay with that. But no one will think that. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Yeah, that was a long conversation, but he eventually came through. But that's, like I said, that's a designer versus business goal versus reality kind of discussion. So, yeah, that kind of leads into my next phase of discussion is have multiple interests. If you're a designer, that's great, but do other stuff. Like if you like hiking, go hiking. Find other things you like because that feeds in to the work you do. I enjoy things like, you know, cooking with garlic, feudal Japanese history, French murder mysteries, just random things that honestly you wouldn't think appeal to the work you do. But the fact that you have those feeds into your experience because as a designer and as a user experience person, you recognize that all the things that you take out helps you identify with the user, connect with the experience they're trying to get into, and because you have multiple experiences, you have you develop. And I'm not saying that it's a requirement, but it does help you develop a natural flexibility for recognizing shall we say, the non-linear thinking of a person who you're designing for. And I think that's one of the good things to come up with. Yes, my question for everyone here is who here likes tests? Something's wrong with you people. But the one test I want to give, and this is an example of a client, and we're going to do a little bit of a brainstorming exercise, and there will be prizes given to people who participate. Yes, there's prizes. One of the so who here has seen Harry Potter? Of course you know. Who here knows what a Marauders map is? Someone describe it real quick.
Marauders map it's a special map that you cast a spell on it, and then once if you're one of the special 4 people that you open this map, it shows everyone who's in the castle, and it shows their footprints, like their name, and secret passageways.
It's like an NSA tracking system for everyone in the entire school, basically. And includes students, teachers, and just anyone else who have, even like the janitor track thing. Now let's say you get a client who hates magic, but likes this map and wants you to develop a app for it. So that in lieu of a map that they can just open up, they would be able to like pop up and open their smart machine and just be able to track it that way. Now if you were designing it, what would be the first question you ask? Okay, what would be the second question you ask after why don't you like magic?
How do you track people?
I don't know, that's what the app's supposed to tell you. Like, how does it track people, or?
Yeah, like how do you go about tracking the road in the castle? Like, that's the question, is how the magic works.
Yeah.
I'd question how ethical it is first.
Okay. We're gonna get past that right now.
Because what's the scale you want it to be?
Anyone else?
These are questions you're asking me.
No, these are the questions that should go back and forth. It's not it's a give and take, so this isn't.
What kind of people?
Okay.
I just want to win a prize, but
You are not eligible.
who is going to track people and why are they tracking them?
Okay.
Like, how much are you paying me for this?
That should be covered before this conversation even begins. But, important question nonetheless. So, the question you want to ask is, yes, why? Ethics aside, yes, why? Because the first stage of any question first stage of any product is, it's not what do you want to do with it, where you want to go is like, why do you need to do this? Because essentially the goal is you want to be able to track students. You want to be able to you want to be able to track students, track teachers, track what floor they're on, as well as track the transition of time of where individuals are, or groups of individuals are, or specific houses. So the point of this exercise was not so much to basically go, you have to answer this question correctly. The point of the exercise is to realize that whenever you go into a room with someone, you have to be curious. Like, you have to like show. And it's not a matter of showing interest in the product. It's literally understanding the fact that they want something, they want you to help them build it, but you have to be able to ask them, and they won't know what to add, they won't know what questions that, they won't know what answers to tell you.
I do just want to point out, I've talked to Philip about this before, and he's told me that he's seen this used in actual job interviews, where they give this to you and ask you what questions would you ask as a designer. So this is the kind of thing to be prepared for interviews.
Because the reason being is that they don't want you to answer the question correctly. What they want is to see how your brain works. They want to be able to see how you walk into a room with people you've never been with and basically develop and it's not a connection, don't get me wrong, this is not a pass-fail situation. This is literally just how does your brain work with a group of people trying to figure out a problem. And it's, like I said, it's not going to get solved in like 10 minutes. This is the thing about also about UX and UI design is this is a long process. This is not within 3 months we'll have an answer. You may have an answer that makes sense at that point in time, but the longer you get into it, the longer you Q&A it, the more you realize it will change, which is fine because it's supposed to. I mean, that's the point of almost any product. I mean, anyone who's ever used an Adobe product, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, that thing's changed so many times, it's ridiculous. Like when CS5 came out, they already announced CS6 was coming out. And then when 6 came out, Creative Cloud was announced. So that's what they do. Like, it's always a development process. But the thing about that test was that it teaches you that you need to see everything from a 360 view. Like, you know, I know we kind of joked about the why did you like magic, but that actually is a good question to ask because